So continuing the farmers' protest theme that we had from a couple of weeks ago, we've got another discussion because there was another farmers' protest, and joining us again is Tracy Worcester, farmer in Gloucestershire. How are you doing, Tracy?
Very good, thank you.
Um, and you actually were at the protest on Tuesday, and you have very kindly sent some footage with interviews on it, so I'm going to play in a bit. Also joining you is Roger Meacock, who's a former farming vet and now is a holistic vet and a well-known commentator on agricultural affairs. Is that a fair way of describing you, Roger?
Yeah, sort of commentating on farming and sort of the bigger agenda as well. So yeah, little bit of notoriety there.
Right. Well, so we'll just start the discussion with the footage from Tuesday because there's lots of people who spoke in the interviews there. So I'll just play that and we can pick up some themes from that.
Yeah, we're here really to protect the rural way of life, rural jobs. We want good quality British produce to put on the plate. We don't want imported food from around the world grown by corporations, and that's really why we're here. We're not here protesting against the tax per se, but given the way farms are structured and the very, very small margins they work to, we cannot afford this tax. It's as simple as that. UK agriculture will disappear very, very quickly under these taxes as they stand today. So we are asking for a softening, not necessarily a complete eradication, but a softening of what they're proposing. And that's why, farmers from up and down the country are here today, because it really, really digs deep. This is about every small business up and down the country. Businesses that support farms that support businesses, but even other businesses. We're all going to be affected by these changes. Then you put on top of the national insurance changes, the pension changes, the grant systems that they've just cut and stopped. It's all coming at once on the back of a very period of high inflation when we're already, with our backs to the wall, frankly. And so we've got nothing to lose and everything to gain by being here fighting hard for our industry, our rural way of life, and everybody that's connected to it. That's the bottom line.
My farm is too small to be a viable farm for me to earn enough money to support myself on my own. Yet I will still, if I die, my family will be subject to inheritance tax, which they simply can't afford to pay. All this is doing is it's taking away farmland from medium-sized and small farmers and giving it into the hands of large corporations, because corporations don't pay death duties and they're after the land for carbon capture, for solar farms, for all manner of things. So land prices aren't going to go down. New entrants aren't going to come into farming. It's a land grab, essentially. So we can put land into the hands of large multinational corporations.
I think they only see farms as tax evasion, which, as many know, is not the case. There is a lot of big people out there that are using it, but the likes of everybody here today are not those people. And the problem is, he set the threshold far too low, and it's absolutely killing, or it will kill everybody that's here today, pretty much.
We're here today to protest against the government and all the inheritance tax, because it's not a big farm. It doesn't produce a massive income, if any really, but with this new tax for inheritance, if my mum dies, then I need to find 600 grand to keep the farm, which, no one will be able to do that, so that's why I'm here today.
We've got an 88-year-old mother, widowed 31 years ago, who's now got to pay, after April 2026, will pay a massive inheritance tax bill, or a big inheritance tax bill, on a farm that really isn't making enough money to pay it, which is farcical when you consider that a non-farming couple could buy our farm and pass it on with no inheritance tax at all.
The threat towards British farming is massive. The people's food security is being put at risk by a petty, vengeful government that want farmers put down, want farmers destroyed, want farmers put out of business. They want the land, they want cheap imports, they want anything that Bill Gates tells them to do, basically.
What are we going to eat then?
Apparently crickets and mushrooms and bovar. Mass factory farming is absolutely horrific for the environment, and it's horrific for the people that have to eat it. The more you can do things in the old-fashioned ways, with a fewer amount of animals, in an outdoor, sustainable system, you're producing something that's a far higher quality, so you can have less of it. By having less of a quality product, like British produce, you're eating food that's more sustainable and better for the environment.
And while we're here, everyone thinks it's inheritance tax, but that's not the worst thing. I think there's a whole lot of issues with farming at the moment. There's no money in it for starters. They're trying to phase out all these small-time farmers, so all the big companies can buy their land. I think that's what it seems like anyway.
So you've got Ed Miliband trying to cover the countryside in solar panels, and you've got Angela Rayner trying to smother the countryside in housing. It's strange. It's very odd timing that they want to take the power away from small individuals and get it more into something they can control more. But we won't go lying down. We will keep fighting. We will be here. We will keep coming back because we're not going to accept it. We don't lay down. What will happen is we just import more from around the world, and you'll get hormone-fed beef from Brazil that's fed antibiotics constantly. They're cutting down the Amazon rainforest to put massive feedlots in, and you'll just rely on food imports. America, you've got chlorine chicken, you've got again hormone-fed beef from America, and it's just more and more. You see, we used to rely on Eastern Europe, now that's on fire, all at war. And what happens when there's a poor harvest in the rest of the world? Our food security is just going to be awful. I think food security is national security, and just taking away the expertise and the knowledge from British farmers is just a disaster waiting to happen.
Today we're here because of the Labour government's latest budget, which is spelling the death knell of farming as we know it, which is something the British public really need to get awake to and try and join us to stop that happening. There will be more factories and there will be more imports. In the last 5 years there's over 200 mega factories opened in Britain, and that will be the future.
And yeah, we left at about 6:30 this morning on the A21, headed up, took about 2.5 hours to central London. Quite an experience, so I've not done that before. Not the easiest commute, so I think I'll get the train next time. But yeah, no, really good. Nice to see lots of people here supporting a good cause, you know, trying to back British farming and saying, you know, some of these new rules you're putting in, they will have unintended consequences of getting rid of a lot of British farmers and the small farmers, and their grounds are going to get bought up by these companies, corporations, and you know, we're going to end up importing more food, and that's not always a good thing. You know, we need to look after our local food.
Farming has no future in the UK unless what we do is valued and we receive some kind of sensible remuneration for the hours we put in, the risks we take and the time we spend. The previous government was hell-bent on Brexit and was prepared to make a deal, any deal, in order to prove that they could do so at the detriment to our industry. And this government is determined to bankrupt us by other means. So I'm not entirely sure it really matters what colour tie the politicians are wearing. But I do not feel that agriculture or food production is valued in this country. Certainly not by government.
I think it's ideologically driven. I think the amount of money that the inheritance tax is going to raise is not going to make any difference to the national economy. And they've made a whole lot of promises about income tax, which they haven't raised, and so they're trying to find the money elsewhere.
You've got to back British farming, support it all the way. So they're trying to get rid of the farming business and the farming industry, and they start making this processed food in these big factories you get in, which is not sustainable in the long run, because you think about it, farming has come from a long generation, from your clothes to your food to your alcohol, it's all based on a farming background.
We are currently doing our best to support as we can and doing the work that we can. We've done this for absolutely centuries for our country, and it's all being turned around and thrown at us, and we don't know where to go from now.
We just love our way of life, and really we supply you with a beautiful country to live in, which is all manicured by us. Food, and really food way too cheap for what you should be really paying for it. But we don't mind that. But when you start interfering with our land and soil, because we're quite an unruly rabble when we get going, and if they don't listen to us, they might find just how unruly we can be. Because it wouldn't take us long with all this lot to stop every motorway, every port. I'm not saying that's what we want to do. If they don't listen, then we come in very nicely today with no intention of being ruffians or whatever, just to try and make them understand the error of their ways.
The quote that stood out for me was agriculture's not valued. What would you like to say about that issue there?
I think that the farmers are precious, they're heroes, they are what we need 3 times a day. So for me, this is a big call out. So it's not just the farmers that are going to suffer by our government that is wanting to basically eradicate farmers. They want giant farms that are owned by their bankster colleagues in return for their pumping money into whatever the government and the banksters want, whether it's buying up all our land, the banks buying up all our land, really? But this government has already admitted that it would rather rule Britain from Davos through the World Economic Forum than through Westminster. So we need to take to the streets every time our farmers go with their tractors up and block the roads. We need to be there. Thousands of us, thousands and thousands and thousands of us, because we're the ones who are going to be eating the insects. We're the ones who our government's taking to war, and we're an island. We might not have any food if we get rid of our farmers. And actually, however much we can criticize the way that the farmers are feeding us sometimes with the pesticides and the factories, it's the system that pushes them to make our food like that. It's the supermarkets, the stranglehold of the supermarket. We need to go to our farmers, our local farmers, and buy from them and actually join their marches.
Some in the media and some commentary has been going on is they just talk about the very well-off people like Jeremy Clarkson and try to throw a straw man argument about these are the people they're representing. And if Nigel Farage is there because he's divisive, I don't particularly like him. A lot of people don't like him. So if he's there, then they'll say it's a Farage-backed demonstration. They're using as many arguments as they can to undermine the farmers as well. They're kind of dividing. It's a divide and rule thing, isn't it, here?
I tell you, if they really wanted to stop the wealthy from dodging taxes by buying our land, they're going completely in the wrong direction. And they know that. This isn't a mistake. They know that they're rich people who they want to be wined and dined by and see the corporations taking over. But we don't want corporate control because the corporations, they only care about their bottom line, whereas human beings care about each other's health. So we've got to really watch out because already you've got people like Dyson round here that will just pay an extra quarter of what the land is owned. For example, there was a farm for sale for 2 million, and he just said, "I'll give you 2,400,000, take it off the market now." And this has been happening all over the country, and BlackRock is involved. They've said that they're going to invest 100 million in British farmland.
Roger, what would you like to say about what Tracy said? Do you agree with most of what she said?
Yeah, absolutely. This is, I think I went up to the first demonstration that happened recently, and we had some great speakers and everybody was passionate. And the thing that really struck me was that how many farmers don't seem to grasp that this is a bigger picture, and there's no mistake in what they're doing. It's all being done deliberately. It is a land grab. It is trying to look after the investors, and it is exactly as Tracy said, it's coming from diktats from likes of World Economic Forum, United Nations, and all the rest of it. There are aims. If you look at the C40 Cities website, there are food predictions for the future, and they want to get meat and dairy consumption down to zero. And they've got the target for doing that by 2030. They think it's possibly unrealistic, but they think a realistic target for meat consumption by 2030 is 16 kilos of meat per person per year, which is ridiculous. So there is an agenda. There is a declared agenda by those who are the non-governmental organizations that are dictating to the governments to push this agenda based on net zero, which is unattainable anyway and undesirable. And this, so they've declared it. This isn't happening by chance. It's not a mistake. It's not a miscalculation. It's all being done deliberately, and they want these monocultures, which aren't good for our soil, as some of the farmers were saying. It's we need to get back to regenerative farming and producing local food that we source locally, and that is the way to reduce pollution and everything else that goes hand in hand with traveling food all around the world. And if we do have some of these wars seem to be escalating, if they do escalate, then there's going to be food shortages already happening. We've seen what's happened with a lot of the food that's been grown in these greenhouses in Spain that got destroyed by the rains and everything there. So we are heading towards food shortages. And if the shipping lanes get interfered with by international wars, then, we are only producing 60% of our food for the UK at the moment. And that's what really got us through World War II, was the ability for farmers and for people to grow our own food and to be self-sufficient on food, because that's unfortunately where we're headed if we don't get our act in gear.
Has this whole taxing of the farms and these other issues, has it politicized farmers in a way that you haven't seen before?
I think so. I mean, to be honest, all the farmers that I knew when I was doing my farm vet work, too busy to get involved in politics in any other way. That they work a very long day from very early hours in the morning to very early hours the next morning. People have no idea how many hours go into running livestock farms and dairy farms and arable farms at times. So it has been politicized, but I would say there's a bigger issue here in that nobody should be being charged inheritance tax. It's that is money which people have paid tax on and have accumulated over their lifetime. They've already paid the tax on it, and I would urge people to sort of rise up and say, it's not just the farmers who shouldn't be paying inheritance tax. None of us should be paying inheritance tax. Charge a capital gains tax when land is sold, maybe. Then that would discourage from house prices and for keeping rising out of everybody's reach. And that's what they did in France, I believe. When our house prices were going up and up and up, they had a capital gains tax on a property there, which is why people were then able to cash in their properties in the UK and buy relatively cheaply and much bigger in France. Because when there's a tax on the capital gains on a property, then there's less incentive for that property to rise in value, because they're not going to be able to achieve it, because it's going to be, the rises are going to be taxed, and it's the difference between what they bought it for and what they sell it for that gets taxed on, not the whole amount. Whereas obviously the inheritance tax is being taxed on the whole value of the whole property, which some of the farmers, that land is worth nothing other than, to a certain degree, other than what it can produce in terms of produce. It's gone up in value because of people trying to use it as a tax dodge, and it's got a paper value. But that value can only be cashed in when it's sold, and but then we lose our small farmers, and that's we're very excited.
And someone mentioned that large corporations wouldn't pay any obviously any inheritance tax because they're not family, so it's much cheaper for them to buy the land and then not have any threat of inheritance tax.
Yeah, and it's not as easy for farmers to put land into trusts or into limited companies and things, because if you don't own your land because you put it into a trust, you can't borrow against it. And obviously a lot of farmers, especially the arable farmers, the harvest will be a good time of the year when they're selling what they've grown, the money will come in. But for large elements of, large months of the year, it's money out. So it's not like it's a steady income month on month. So they've got to be able to borrow against their land to be able to buy, buy the grains, but, buy new equipment and all the rest of it. So, it's not so easy to, to do a dodge when your land is less than productive and you're supposedly asset rich but cash poor. It's not so easy then to do what these so-called dodges might be. They sound good on paper, but in terms of practicality, they don't actually necessarily make the farm ability to function carry on.
Also, if you do put your land into the 7-year rule, you cannot anymore earn from that land. So you then have to judge, well, how long am I going to live before I have to give it to my son and then retire and do what? So it's like you don't know when you're going to die, but you'll be unable to earn a penny from that land. So you've got to give it all for your son to earn or your daughter to earn that money if you give it away into that 7-year rule. So it's not easy. And also, it's not the farmers that made their land that valuable. They don't want it to be that valuable. It's the asset managers. It's the people doing what the government says they're trying to stop, which is people investing just to get the advantage of, future improvement in its value, or giving it to solar panels or windmills or birdseed or countryside. It's like, what are you doing to our food? But they don't care.